Welcome to Meet the Candidate, and my guest for this session is Maia Espinoza, running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Welcome, Maia.
Thanks for having me, Sue.
So this is the Get Acquainted conversation. So starting with, where did you grow up and go to school?
Yeah, well, I am a military brat, so born on an Air Force base in Biloxi, Mississippi, to two military parents. I traveled all over the country, moved all over the country, attending a dozen different public schools during that time. So, where are you from is always a sensitive question for someone like
True.
me. But I made Washington State my home after coming to this beautiful state. I just totally fell in love, like so many of our military families. My parents have since been restationed. My mom served 2 tours overseas in Iraq, and my dad's currently overseas serving. And my siblings have all slowly moved back, all but one. So Washington is very much our home, but grew up all over the country and certainly got a flavor for our public schools nationwide and here in Washington.
That's one of the advantages of being from the military, which is a perfectly good place to be from.
Yeah, well, and all of us siblings kind of turned out differently, I think. Some of us really adapted well to moving a lot, and others did not like it at all. Of course.
So one of the other questions I like to ask is about early work experience, the kinds of things that shape how you see that connection between effort and the payoff.
I'm so glad you asked this question, Sue. I think it's an important one. There are a lot of people that are my age that are kind of just getting into their careers, but as the oldest of 5 in a 2-parent working household, I was working since I was legally old enough to do so, and always selling stuff as a kid, whether it's the sales competitions or I was always doing something, the lemonade stand, it. But so I started working, 15 and a half years old when I was legally allowed to do so. However, as a minor in our state, you were only allowed to work 20 hours per week maximum, but there was no law against 2 jobs. So I had 2 20-hour-a-week jobs as a high school student, and then I did running start, so did some college, high school, working 2 jobs. Was able to go on to college and, of course, worked and put myself through college. Then I had my daughter actually in my last year of college, so I very much thought I was done. It was time to be a mom and stay at home, but there were some friends of mine whose parents, especially moms in this community that I grew up here in Lakewood, that really encouraged me, keep going, finish your education. It's so important. You're so close. You can do it. And so with some help, I was able to finish my bachelor's degree before I was old enough to drink. I still actually had to maintain a full-time working schedule so that I could get childcare subsidy from the state. If you're a student in this state, you could get childcare subsidy, but only up until a 2-year degree. So because I was pursuing my 4-year, I also had to work full-time, and of course, single mother during this time. So definitely was a challenging time, but I persevered, and my daughter was my complete motivation during that time. She still is. I've got 2 kids now, though, and so, having one in middle school, having one in grade school, I'm a persistent parent of, you can do it, keep going, just like I was taught. And so hard work has always paid off for me. not for a lack of trying, that's for sure. But after college, I worked in marketing and sales. My degree is in business administration, so I went on to do that. Worked for a number of different firms in Seattle, kind of got a flavor up there before taking a session job actually in Olympia for the state legislature. And that was what really opened my eyes to politics and government in our state. With two military parents, I've always been very patriotic, but never particularly politically polarized. And so I was just involved, in helping my community be represented. So I founded the Center for Latino Leadership after working for the legislature for a year. And then I was recruited by the governor's State Commission on Hispanic Affairs, and I served as the legislative liaison there, and was successful in passing collaborative and bipartisan legislation. And so I had a wonderful experience. I still run my nonprofit to this day. We've helped get folks elected from Seattle City Council to Quincy School Board and state representatives and those of the like. So I think what we've got is a great network of Latino leaders that continue to push themselves and push each other here, so that we can expect more from one another. But hard work is certainly a value of mine, and education has always been something of high priority for me. So I'm actually almost done with my master's in curriculum and instruction. I started pursuing this after being recruited for a global transatlantic inclusion leaders education forum. And so in this experience, I saw what different countries around the world are doing in their education models, and kind of started asking, can we be doing something differently at home? And that's kind of how the ball got rolling here. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later too.
Well, that was one of the questions I usually ask, is what prompted you to go into the politics? I can see you made the connection when you were working with the legislature. Why pursue let's start with, describe how you see the responsibilities of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and then why pursue that personally?
Yeah, so the Superintendent of Public Instruction in our state runs an agency, runs the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's about a 450-person office that helps manage all of our public schools in Washington. And of course, we have some charter schools, so charter schools are considered public schools as well. The superintendent really just manages that administrative office and has to work with the State Board of Education on curriculum, and also has to work with the legislature should there need to be changes to the law. So the role of this office is pretty narrowly defined, but as I see it, I think it's really the person that is the go-between between each of these entities. And I think my experience in being a go-between between the legislature, the governor's office, the Latino community, I think I fit this role well. And one thing I think that, my opponent is not measuring up to is that liaising back to the actual community members, the parents, the teachers, the school board members. And I think that is such an important piece. And as we saw in this last year, I think it was ignored, frankly, and discounted. We know that OSPI just recently came out with these reopening schools guidelines, and it was 168 some odd member work group. And, some of them happen to be parents with kids in schools, but the majority were, as I saw it, special interest groups and different folks weighing in to help make this decision. And I think the community was absolutely absent from that. So I see this role as really that convener, and I think we can be doing a better job.
Okay. Well, what prompted you to do it? Why did you feel called to the position?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I was recruited for this Global Education Forum, and it started sparking this curiosity in education for me, in public education and the way it's administrated. Certainly this is, amidst McCleary recently being resolved, and so education funding really amplifying quite significantly compared to recent memory. We've more than doubled our education spending in recent years. And it was curious to me how different countries had well, in some cases, we're using our technology and our systems in a better way, I think, than we had been. And I think COVID really exposed that. Once our schools were closed, it was kind of a mad dash and a scramble to get kids online and continue learning. Whereas in other countries, such as the Netherlands and Estonia, and even, I think South Korea was another example of this, there's always been an online component to learning. There's always a component where kids can interact online, receive their assignments, access lectures, take tests, for example, or study for them. And from what we saw here in our state, it was really disorganized. And we actually do have a state-approved online curriculum that would have been perfectly appropriate to implement, but we kind of left it up to, take a month off, everybody kind of lay low, parents are wondering what's going to be happening, I mean, having been in that boat, and then all of a sudden, each district is doing something different, and in my case, each school was doing something different. And I would, love to have helped my children work through that a little bit better, but in many cases, and heard this from parents statewide, they were struggling to figure out these new systems in real time. And so a lot of this we know severely hampered our children's ability to continue learning, let alone the social disruption. So this interest was sparked, and then when it was actually the comprehensive sex ed bill, which was 5395, I had been very much kind of fantasizing about, wow, couldn't we do something very differently here in this state? Wouldn't that be nice to do someday? When this comprehensive sex ed bill was passed, and in the way that it was passed, I was one of those parents that showed up to testify against it. I think, regardless of what you think about these actual curriculum options that are appropriate within this new law, this approach said that the state knows what's best for your districts, completely bypass local control in this case. And so I just thought that was, for a sensitive issue, to make something like sex ed a partisan issue, I just thought was completely a misuse of this office and turned a nonpartisan office into a partisan one. So I wanted to help kind of be a response and be some kind of action to this law being passed. And so that night, 2 a.m, when this bill was finally passed in March, I said, that's it, we're doing it. We're announcing, I'm going to run for this position because parents cannot continue to be ignored. Community members should not be ignored. I don't think the state knows what's best for each of these local school districts. We should be helping, not working against. And then most importantly, can we do something to reimagine education finally? That was very much my platform when launching. So although my reason for jumping in was that sex ed bill, my entire platform is built around, let's update our school system. And thanks or no thanks to the COVID-19 school closures, we actually have an opportunity right in front of us to do it right now.
Maya, I think you very accurately just summed up the last question without my even asking it, which is to give those questions. Why should people vote for Maia Espinoza for Superintendent of Public Instruction? Yeah, that was a good summary.
Yes, I won't, try to muddy the waters at all, but I do think that we have this opportunity in front of us right now. With it, again, being a nonpartisan race, we've got to restore that nature to this office. And I think, nonpartisan can mean bipartisan. It means working together, but it means making sure that our kids in our classrooms are not subject to political agendas. And that's just so important. And so I believe that our local school districts and communities should be empowered, should be listened to, and I hope to earn everyone's vote for that reason.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Maya.
Thank you for having me, Sue. I really appreciate it.
90 million Christians are eligible to vote.
40 million didn't.
That's 45% of eligible Christians not voting.
We can change that.
We Believe We Vote was designed to arm people of faith with information on candidates
and how they line up with biblical and constitutional principles.
It's simply WeBelieveWeVote.com.
We're on a mission to rev up the 2020 election.
Tell your friends, your neighbors, and especially your pastors to rev up.
Be an educated voter.
Arm yourself with truth based on the Word of God.
2020, rev up.
Register, educate, vote.
Rev up.
Rev up.
Rev up 2020.